BMW's new M Hybrid LMDh disappointed on its first race outing in the Rolex 24. But after both cars finished significantly off the pace and multiple laps down, it begs the question, where does BMW go from here? First, let's go back to the very beginning when BMW announced their LMDh program. On June 11, 2021, BMW announced that it would be returning to prototype racing for the first time in over 20 years. What piqued their interest to return to the class of racing that previously saw them win the 24 Hours of Le Mans as well as the 12 Hours of Sebring? Well, it was the new LMDh regulations that were announced that would allow the top class of prototype racing to compete both in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship and in the World Endurance Championship. In a nutshell, the LMDh regulations are the rule set created by both IMSA and the World Endurance Championship for all cars that will be competing in their respective top classes. Based on the regulations, manufacturers must choose to partner with one of 4 chassis manufacturers that they will build their car up off of. Other defined items include minimum weight, a maximum power output, and an aerodynamic balance are just some of the things that are defined in this set of regulations. And these regulations actually leave manufacturers a lot of freedom to be able to build their car. They can use things such as different engine configurations from one manufacturer to another. This gives the designers a lot of creative freedom so that they can achieve what the regulations require of them, but also make each car look unique to the respective manufacturer. Throw in some spec parts such as the hybrid system and gearbox, and there you go. You basically have yourself an LMDh car. In the months that followed BMW's announcement that they would be returning to the top flight of prototype racing, they announced that they would be partnering with Dallara as their chassis provider. And a short while later, they would announce a partnership with longtime BMW customer team, Team RLL. Now, both of these partnerships were very highly regarded, as you have a manufacturer in Dallara that has a tremendous amount of experience producing cars and chassis, and you have Team RLL that had been a BMW customer team for years, and even operating their factory programs in championships such as IMSA. In fact, Dallara was coming off a very strong era in IMSA as they partnered with Cadillac with their Dallara P217 LMP2 car as the basis for Cadillac's DPI VR, which had been running in IMSA for previous years, and seeing quite a bit of success along the way as well. Meanwhile, Team RLL also had a very strong relationship with BMW, dating all the way back to 2009. And at the time of the announcement, Team RLL was operating the BMW GTLM program in IMSA, which over its lifespan had saw the program win multiple Rolex 24s as well as multiple IMSA championships. Based on everything I've just said, it sure does seem like BMW got off on the right foot for this program. And even as competitors such as Acura, Cadillac, and Porsche were announcing their programs, BMW really remained one of the early frontrunners with the very strong foundations that they had put down right out of the gate. The BMW M Hybrid V8 hit the track for its rollout on July 25th, 2021 in Italy to kick off a couple of months of European summer testing before the car would come over to the United States. The car would arrive in the United States in September before completing a test in Sebring and later on going to do a livery unveil towards the end of September. After livery was unveiled as part of the lead up to the season-ending Motul Petit Le Mans, the car would head out for some more testing, again, just ahead of the IMSA sanctioned test that would take place in the days following the season-ending race. BMW was present for the test that immediately followed Petit Le Mans, but just barely. You see, the week prior to this IMSA sanctioned test, BMW was doing some more testing of their own up at Watkins Glen. During this test, there was some less than ideal weather conditions, and one of the drivers that was testing the car lost control of the car and actually crashed. The crash resulted in a small amount of chassis damage and would have to be repaired by Dallara. In order to have the car ready for the IMSA sanctioned test that was a mere days away, Team RLL had to bring the chassis back to Indianapolis, where Dallara could complete the work on it before the car was turned around and sent down the road to Road Atlanta. This chapter did have a happy ending as the car was able to successfully arrive at Road Atlanta and participate in the test. However, it was at this test that BMW admitted that there was a lack of mileage that they were able to put on the car so far in testing. And this led to some speculation that there may have been some more setbacks that BMW encountered at that previous Sebring test. Day one of the test at Road Atlanta went off pretty much without a hitch for BMW. And in fact, it was deemed a breakthrough day for the team, as it was the first test that they really experienced no significant setbacks or issues. Overall, the test was a quiet one in the BMW camp, and it started to instill some confidence that this could be the turning point for the development of this car. Further testing would continue in the lead up to the final IMSA sanctioned test at Daytona in early December. At this test, BMW would finally introduce their first race chassis into the testing environment, and they actually had 2 cars present for this test. It was also revealed at this time that BMW, when trying to complete a previously scheduled 24-hour test, actually had a gearbox issue that cut that test short. And in revealing this, BMW also said that there would not be enough time for them to complete another 24-hour test ahead of the Rolex 24, meaning that they would be joining Acura as the only manufacturers to not complete a 24-hour test heading into the Rolex. This wouldn't slow down an extensive testing schedule for BMW though, as that continued right up to the Roar before the 24. And as a matter of fact, coming out of the Roar before the 24, Team RLL team principal Bobby Rahal expressed that he was, quote, confident that there was reliability as well as performance in the car. When the calendar turned to race day though, it was anything but smooth sailing. BMW were the first of the GTP class cars to encounter an issue when they did so with the number 25. Around the 1 hour mark, number 25 experienced a hybrid failure that required numerous part changes in the garage and cost the car around 2.5 hours of race time. Meanwhile, the 24 was actually hanging around for a pretty good portion of this race. That was until the final quarter of the race, when the team experienced some hybrid issues that ultimately resulted in a brake problem and ultimately led to a pretty lengthy stop in the garage to make repairs. When the dust settles, the cars finished 6th and 9th in the 9-car class. Now, it's a little bit difficult to say just how far off the pace BMW was in this race, just given that they were dealing with a number of issues throughout the entirety of this race. On the bright side, Connor De Filippi put in a very quick 1 minute 36 second flat lap time, and that was in the first stint of the race before they experienced those hybrid issues. And that lap would hold up to be just under 0.4 of a second faster than the fastest lap of the race by Tom Blomqvist. Overall though, the BMWs were almost always the slowest of the GTP cars on track, with many of the drivers' fastest lap times being over a second off the pace of Blomqvist's fast lap. Now, it's pretty obvious to say that this is not where BMW wants to be after the first race of the season. And as I provide my opinion here, please remember that I'm definitely not trying to take anything away from the men, women, and the team that has put so much hard work into getting this car race ready. I am simply just trying to provide my thoughts and observations in hopefully an educated manner to help explain what went wrong and what we might be able to expect from BMW as the season goes on. Okay, let's start off with the reliability issues. Now, spec part failures are not entirely the team's fault, but I do think that the teams play an important role in preventing these issues. You see, with some more testing, some more extensive testing leading up to the race, and especially in some of these endurance environments, some of these issues that plague the team may have been able to be discovered, and measures could have been put in place to prevent these issues from occurring on race day. Now, I can already hear you saying, but Stu, Porsche had issues on race day and they completed the most testing of anyone. Yeah, okay, fair. It could still happen to anyone, but what I'm trying to say here is the more testing that you're able to do, the more issues that you're likely to encounter, and the more data that you're going to have to help prevent some of these issues from popping up again in the future. Take Cadillac. They completed a ton of testing as well. Maybe not as much as Porsche, but still a ton of testing in the lead up to this race. And during the race or after the race, I have not heard of a single concern out of their camp with any of the spec parts that they had on their cars. And keep in mind, they had 1/3 of the LMDh cars on the grid. In my opinion, I think that BMW just ultimately needs some more laps of testing on this car. I think that'll go a long way in just helping to improve the reliability of the car. And ultimately, looking back on the race from just a logging laps perspective, There's a lot of really good pros to come out of this race for BMW. Connor D. Filippi had this to say: "It was the first 24-hour race for our GTP car, and was by far the most hours that we've run in a consecutive period. So that's a huge positive." And even though it was a rough race for BMW, like I said, they logged a lot of laps, and this may be just the kind of kick in the behind that they need to really get the program rolling and start snowballing some of this momentum together. In fact, since the Rolex 24, there was another IMSA-sanctioned test at Sebring. BMW just had one of their cars there, but that one car logged a tremendous number of laps. And while they may have not been the fastest car on track for the duration of the test, it was a big step to see them log so many laps and hopefully work out some of the gremlins that they have in that car. I think once they have a lot of these question marks sort of crossed off of their list, and they start to actually go all in on extracting the maximum performance out of this car, I feel confident that they'll be right up at the front of the grid once again. Now this brings us to the question of how much can we realistically expect them to improve? Well, in the words of one of my favorite artists, it can only go up from here. Let me know in the comments if you know who I'm referring to. But I do think it's a little unrealistic to see BMW roll into Sebring and be in serious contention here. Even despite everything that they've learned coming out of the Rolex 24 and into this IMSA-sanctioned test, it's going to take some time to apply the lessons learned in these tests and for the results to start showing. Now, with that being said, I don't think it's unrealistic for us to see BMW competing for podiums before too long here. We all know how vast the IMSA schedule is and just the different variety of tracks that we see every single year, and how each different type of track can cater to a different manufacturer's car. I really would not be surprised if we head to a track that really suits that BMW and we see them getting a really strong result out of it. I think it's going to be a little while before we can see BMW as a contender for race victories, but podiums are definitely going to be within reach. And look, let's not forget that it wasn't that long ago that we saw a disastrous start for Mazda in the DPI era. The cars were catching fire left, right, and center and just showing overall horrendous reliability. But that turned into them being one of the quickest cars on the DPI grid up to the time when the program was shut down. This is just the start of a new era, and given BMW's vast experience and their success in endurance racing all over the world, it's not going to be long before we see them on top of the podium with their M Hybrid LMDh. BMW are just one of 4 manufacturers that are competing in IMSA's GTP class, with another manufacturer coming in 2024. But what is GTP, and who are the other current GTP manufacturers? You can learn all about the GTP class right here. Huge thank you to all of our early Patreon supporters. If you too want to support the show, you can head to patreon.com/offintheesses. Once again, thanks for tuning in. I hope everyone has a great race weekend and doesn't go off in the S's.